So if you're with us on Zoom, you can begin putting questions into the chat. I've done an initial go-through, and boy, you've got some good questions. So Unitarian Universalism is known as a living tradition, and throughout the ages it has changed and evolved, but there are two things that have remained true. One is that we are non-creedal. We believe that truth, God, reality is too big to be contained within a creed. And the other is that revelation is not sealed, that there is forever new truth, new awareness, new insight that is breaking into us and changing our understandings. So I am going to begin with words that came out of with questions that came out of the new member orientation class. And for those of you who are long-term UUs, I would encourage you to listen to these questions so that you could be prepared to answer them as well when our new folks who are new among us ask. So the first is, what do I say when people say, you, what's that? How to summarize without putting others down. So here's my best attempt. We come from Christian roots and have grown to be theologically pluralistic, drawing from many sources and faith perspectives in our search for truth and meaning. We gather around a set of principles that guide our individual and communal lives, principles that call us to action for collective liberation and social justice. Not a creed. It's who we are. So the next question, I've had a week to think about these, and I will get to some of yours too, but the next question was, how do you build subversiveness into your system? So apparently we're seen as subversive. So first of all, we'll talk about what subversive means. I think in today's language, we would talk more in terms of dismantling. So we're going to subvert or dismantle systems of oppression. So any systems that oppress people in body, mind, or spirit, we're going to work to subvert. We're going to work to dismantle. How do we build that into our system? And that is the question that is in front of us right now as we are engaging in a congregation-wide and association-wide study of widening the circle of concern, which is looking at how we do this. How do we be that progressive, subversive faith that is working for collective liberation? So the short answer to that for me is how we live it. It's how within these walls that we very consciously live in the ways that our principles call us to. And that out of that practice, we build our system to codify it. And say, here are our practices. These are the ways that we are together, that build community, that call us to work for social justice in the larger world. How we do that is we're going to do that together. The next question is, what is the ritual when a member dies? And remember, these are coming from our new member orientation class. And the second part of that is, what is the understanding of afterlife? So I'm going to go with the second portion of that question first. What is the understanding of afterlife? And my flip answer is, ask 5 UUs and you'll get 10 answers. So the more serious answer to that question is that we spend more time thinking about life here and now. And that among our membership, you will encounter people who have a diverse set of beliefs and ideas about what happens to us when we die. And a lot of that is based on personal experience. You know, we've all had experience of a loved one who has died, and we know what we experience in the aftermath. So the one thing that I can say in answer to that afterlife question, I think that there is one thing that we would share in common about that afterlife question, is that whatever it is that comes next, that we will not be divided into the saved and the damned, the punished and the rewarded. We won't be divided by who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. So that we are all part of a source of life that embraces us all. And that's what we mean when we say universal salvation. And what is the ritual when a member dies? We commonly call that ritual a celebration of life or a memorial service. And again, in that service, what we do is we spend time really truly celebrating who that person was. And we share stories of that person's life. And we sing songs of comfort, and we all do our best to make meaning of what that passage meant for the person who died and for those of us who live beyond. And we don't spend a lot of time trying to explain what comes next. Again, willing to live in that unknowing and that mystery. What exactly do I need to believe or not believe to be considered a you? So I think a lot of it is contained in that opening hymn that we sang, the things that we believe in. We believe in life. We believe in love. We believe in being together. And we truly believe that the questions lead us to answers. Not believe to be considered a you. And I think that that's a really important question, because sometimes we can get so inclusive in who is welcome among us that we don't pay attention to that question. And for me, the answer to what can we not believe as yous? And for me, it comes down to one thing. We cannot believe in hate. So any belief that leads us in the direction of hate is not something that we're going to embrace here. And then from the new member class, how do you ethically raise money, recognizing the privilege of white communities while keeping the commitment to social justice? Again, that's one of the questions of our time, isn't it? When we talk about our work for especially racial justice and the conversation about really what does it take for restoration and reparation for communities of color who have had so much taken from them. So I think that there's a truism, and I'm not going to be able to quote my source here, that to whom much is given, much is required. So I think that's a kind of a bedrock, is if we've been given, then we give back. We give back generously. And then the other piece of it is that line that I have actually put into the offering every Sunday, which is that it is the offering that keeps our free church free. That when we rely on our members to fund our organization, it keeps us free to set our mission, to set our programming, to be who we are in the world. Whereas if we had funding from outside sources, they're usually tied to someone else's goals and someone else's mission. So that raising money ethically, I think, is at the heart of this is a free church, and if we're going to keep it free, we need to support it with our voluntary generosity. And we recognize that in today's world of immense income inequality, that generosity of contribution is not measured by dollars. It's measured by who has more and who can give more. A lot of these are worth a sermon unto themselves. So I'm going to go to some that are on the blue cards. And for those of you who signed your cards, I'm going to go ahead and share your names. Addie9 asked, what gave you the inspiration to do a job like this? It's a question I ask myself almost every Sunday. For most of my life, I felt what I want to call a divine presence. And I wouldn't exactly call that divine presence God in the way that I was taught that in my childhood Sunday school classes. I would experience it mostly in nature. And all of my life, I felt that call that there should be a sense of service and giving back to this life that is just so wondrous and so beautiful and sometimes so awful. And it took me finding Unitarian Universalism to find the fit for where that call to ministry would fit who I am. The next is also a question about ministry. What is the difference between an interim and a developmental minister? So interim and developmental ministries are both what we call transitional ministries. They happen at a time when a settled minister has left, either resigned or retired, which recently the Reverend Gail Seavey, although it doesn't seem so recent anymore, does it? But the Reverend Gail Seavey retired after a very successful 15-year ministry. So at that point, a congregation has a couple of choices that they can call or hire. I'm hired by the board, not called by the congregation. An interim minister whose primary work is to move through that process from one minister to the next called minister. And it usually takes about 2 years. In a developmental ministry, a congregation has come to an understanding that they need some further developmental work before they feel ready to call that next settled minister. So this congregation went the route of developmental ministry, and I was very honored, deeply honored, to be invited to fill that role. The goals that have been chosen are changing somewhat. Thank you, pandemic. But they were, at the time that I was invited into this position, to revitalize a sense of mission and vision. And your Mission and Vision Task Force has begun that process and has presented you with some provisional statements of mission and vision. And we're going to continue to review those and say, is this who we are now? And is this where we see ourselves going? The second is to look at your governance structure and ask, what is the governance structure that we need for this time and to achieve this mission and vision? And governance is just a fancy way of saying, how do we organize ourselves to fulfill our mission? So we're working on that. The third one is a capital campaign to do the necessary renovations and rebuilding that pre-pandemic looked like a necessary thing to do, and it's still necessary. However, pandemic is not the best time to raise money for new things. So I want to say it's not completely off the table. It's just not, your big dreams are going to take a little bit longer than anticipated. So I hope that answers the question. This one, of all your ministerial experiences, which one would you like to have a do-over? And this came from Hal Potts, and he gave it to me early, and I said, I don't think I have enough time. But the serious answer to that one is that as I think of where we are now in relation to doing our work for anti-racism and to truly be that inclusive, beloved community that we long to be, that, I can look back now and see all of the missteps and mistakes that I have made along the way, mostly out of ignorance and my own unexamined privilege. There's more, and maybe, Hal, you and I can have coffee someday, and I'll give you the rundown. There are so many in here, and I'm just going to read through what they are, and then what I'm going to say, if any of these that I don't get to are truly burning questions for you, that what I would invite you to do is to send me an email, and you can find that on our church website rather easily. Send me an email, and I will gladly find a time to sit down and talk with you. So if this is a burning question and I didn't get to answer it today, please feel free to do that. So I'm just going to breeze through these, and we're going to leave with questions. What role does the Judeo-Christian history contribute to Unitarian and Universalist traditions? I wish I had time for the next one. How do you define evil? What is our responsibility in identifying and confronting evil? Some of these may make a whole sermon, so pay attention. How should a parent approach spirituality with a young child if they themselves do not adhere to a specific creed? My short answer to that is listen to your children. Answer their questions from where you believe. You are resident theologians. If you are a parent, you are the resident theologian, which means you have to do your homework and figure this out for yourself. As a person who has received the privileges of being white, how do you personally and as a congregation help pay back the debt to those that have carried the burden of your privileges? That's our work, isn't it? Figuring that out and then doing it. What would you say to someone who is anti-church because of trauma from the Christian church? If this is your burning question, please do email me, and we'll sit down and we will talk. We are almost out of time. Cheesecake or apple pie? Cheesecake. There are so many more. These questions will undoubtedly make it into what I write for my midweek message, and are many that are worthy of a sermon in themselves. So again, burning questions, email me. It has been a blessing to share this time of deep questioning with you. May they lead to a deeper sense of spirit, a deeper sense of commitment to ourselves, each other, and this movement. May it be so. Amen.